Okay, today is my pleasure to introduce Gene Olson. He's the Director of Airports for Metropolitan Airport Authority of Peoria and has held this position since 2009, so he's been around quite a while. But he is also a fellow Peorian. Gene is responsible for management of the personnel and facilities of the Airport Authority. This includes the operation and development of 2 airports owned by the Airport Authority, the General Wayne A. Downing Peoria International Airport and the Mount Holly Airport. Prior to joining the Airport Authority, Gene served as Assistant Manager of the Evansville, Indiana Regional Airport from June of 2000 to June of 2009. Before Evansville, Gene worked at the Indiana Department of Transportation in aeronautics and for the Indianapolis engineering firm doing airport planning work. Gene is a graduate of Augustana College in Rock Island, Illinois. You're supposed to clap. With a degree in political science and Spanish. Oh, that's pretty good. He's an instrument-rated commercial pilot with over 750 hours of flight time, including complex high-performance and tail-wheel airplanes. Gene's family includes his wife, Andrea, 2 grown sons, and his first grandson. Congratulations on that. I bet he doesn't spoil it. Gene is a graduate of Peoria High School, where he was a varsity swimmer, as was I, but a few years ahead of you. I still kept my shaved head, by the way. And soccer player and a member of the orchestra. In his spare time, Gene is involved in scouting, working with the WD Boys Council, and formerly with Troop 88 in Dunlap. Gene's hobbies include anything outdoors and involves expensive equipment. Especially boating. I haven't read the entire thing yet, Gene. Gene Olson, ladies and gentlemen, fellow Rotarian, by the way.
These 3 little buttons here.
Before I get started, I would just like to say that it's kind of interesting to grow up in a town, leave for 30 years chasing jobs around, come back, and then you learn, like, there's all these different questions that you have with people. So, I mentioned I graduated from Peoria High, so did Alan, and then I find out there's other Peoria High grads in here. Awesome. And then there's at least 3 Wildcats in here. So all of us went to Washington. So that's pretty cool to hear. And then when I was working with the scout troop up in Dunlap, there was a couple of the kids that were, also going to Washington at the time. And I saw this kid with a Wildcats, like, t-shirt or sweatshirt or something like that. And I'm like, did you go to Washington? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, I went there too, and he's looking at me like, you are impossibly old and never went. So anyway, I'll just jump right in. The laser works.
You're out of it.
So how do I get it?
So we have this airport.
It's a nice airport.
Will you lift the microphone up a little bit, please? Thank you.
Is that a little better?
Yeah.
Should I hold it?
You just bend over and talk the whole time?
That's one of the
Okay, how
penalties
were
of
you
being
doing it
tall.
earlier?
I've got lots of interesting scars on the top of my head.
Yeah, I just had it here.
Okay, here. let me see.
No, probably. If not, I'll advance.
Oh,
There
there you
you
go.
go.
Let me get that back in. And then I'll get this going.
Screen.
Nope, we're still not there.
Yeah, hold on. 1 sec. You have a video, so I just have to make sure they have sound.
What time do I have to stop talking?
You're good.
There we go. So we have
They
2
should have
airports, the big one and the little one. The big one, we have basically a 10,000-foot runway for a long runway. We have an 8,000-foot runway for the short runway. we can handle any airplane out there except the B-52. B-52 needs a 300-foot wide runway, and ours is only 150 feet. So if they landed at Peoria, we'd have enough length for them, but they would knock out our runway lights. And those are a few of the major users of the airport. It's kind of an interesting airport. When we recruit employees, especially if they're like operations folks who are trying to start their careers, we say, look, we're a big enough airport that we have everything going on. We've got commercial, we got military, we have corporate aviation, we have general aviation. You're going to learn everything here, and we're not so big that you specialize and like you're stuck in landside ops and you never go out on the field. So that helps us recruit people a little bit. We also have Mount Holly. We get some surprising aircraft at Mount Holly. It's a lot of people, first of all, don't even know that it's a publicly owned airport. They think it's private. The aviation that happens there is private, but the airport is public. These two aircraft were here for one guy. The bigger airplane brought him in from Chicago, and that pilot knew that the guy had to next go to the East Coast. So he couldn't get out of Mount Holly with enough gas to get to the East Coast. So they brought in a smaller jet that could get out of a 4,000-foot runway and make it to the East Coast. I forget the name of the company. I bet you somebody here knows it, but they are the largest processor of zinc in the United States. And they make all the blanks for the U.S. Mint for pennies. And I get on their webpage and I look up the aircraft and I see the company name and I go through and looking at what they make. And they own Berkeley, the fishing tackle company. They own K2 skis. They own a boot company for ski boots. And then there's this guy, he had a full head of curly white hair. And he's standing there in ski togs with a pair of K2 skis and his boots. And I'm like, yeah, that's the guy I saw on the ramp. And so why was he here? Why did they go to Mount Holly? Because that's the closest runway to Caterpillar Mossville. And so he was here to do some kind of deal with zinc. And that's just me sleuthing that out. I don't really know why he was here, but I don't think he wasn't landing at Mount Holly to sell fishing tackle. So you never know what's going to happen at a little airport like that. So a couple of years ago, IDOT did an economic impact study of airports in Illinois. And we took that information and it's got all kinds of good information about the airports. We took the information relative to our airport and we set it to music.
Is that your video?
That's my video.
Can you hit play?
I have to hit play?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, you have to make it work or you're gonna have to sing.
Play.
It's all instrumental. Jim, do you
I
play the
don't-
trombone?
I don't know where you hit play.
I have two trombone players in my family, by the way. Both my boys both played it.
Uh-oh.
So that's kind of a quick way of getting through some really boring numbers in maybe a little bit more entertaining way. If you notice the graphic about the 2,000 employees on the airport, that was probably the biggest shock to me of this whole study. So that's not airport authority employees. We have 23 full-time employees that run the airport. We also have like 9 part-time shuttle drivers, so our total headcount is pretty close to, low 30s. But the 2,000 includes about 700 Air National Guard, about 200 Army National Guard, and then each airline has probably 30, 40, sometimes 50 employees, but most of them are part-time. Each corporation that has a hangar at the airport usually has at least a couple of employees. The FAA, TSA, those are all separate employers. But if you took all of the employment on the airport, and if we all worked for the same employer, we would be the 5th largest employer in the Central Illinois region. But we all work for separate employers, so we're not that big. We contract out a lot of things, so we contract out firefighting to the Air National Guard. We contract out law enforcement to the Peoria County Sheriff, and we contract out custodial to a private company. So that's why our head count is so small. Yeah, go ahead and
And then down at the corner there, move it to the right. Let's go.
There we go.
Let's see what you put.
It's in the video, so I just hit the space bar and it jumped.
So people don't really understand what the airport authority is or does, and so basically what we are is a governmental body, sort of the equivalent of a city. We're classified as a municipal corporation, and we are a creation of state legislation. So we're Peoria County based. A lot of people think that we are also taxing people in Tazewell or Woodford County, and we don't. That might be a nice thing to have a broader tax base, but I don't think politically it'll ever happen. But we're basically created to own and operate airports. And we're governed by a board of commissioners. We have a former commissioner here in the club. Hi, Gary. And so it's a 9-member commission. The commissioners are appointed by elected officials, and they serve 5-year fixed terms. The terms are staggered so that we don't have a mass exodus of experience all at one time. 4 of the members are appointed by mayors of towns in Peoria County that have more than 5,000 people, and then the others are appointed by state legislators that have territory in Peoria County. The way the legislators do it is they take turns, but that's kind of informal. It's also a tradition that the mayor of Peoria always appoints somebody from a major employer. That's not a requirement or a regulation. It's just a tradition. So what do we do? Well, we own and operate the 2 airports, and we're sort of a specialized form of landlord. So we provide the facility for the airlines and some of the other tenants on the airport to do what they do. The closest analogy I can draw is like a shopping mall. When you go to the mall, you don't usually deal with the people that own the mall or operate it. You deal with their tenants. And so that's the same thing with us. I meant to show that one of the big ways that we earn income is through landing fees. So that's a CRJ 200. They weigh about 53,000 pounds. Divide that by 1,000 and multiply that by $1.65, which is our landing fee. So each time one of those lands, we earn $87.45. And they do, like United is probably our lowest frequency. They operate 3 times a day. So, and then when we're really busy, we have more operations. And of course, a larger aircraft generates more income. And then the other big thing that we charge is $20.21 a square foot for space that we rent to the airlines inside the terminal. And I was trying to figure out, how do I illustrate that? And we have these nice little promotional rulers that we give out to kids when we give tours. So that's how we do it. And that we also use that $20.21 a square foot at Mount Holly if we rent space in the building for businesses there. That rate hasn't changed in probably 25 or more years, because that's the red flag. You know, you wave that in front of the airline properties people that you're increasing the square foot rent, and man, do you get complaints. So if we raise the landing fee by a nickel, they don't even notice. So you have to learn how to play that game. A lot of what we do is controlled by the Federal Aviation Administration. So there's a thing called Federal Aviation Regulations Part 139, and it dictates how you operate the airport. So it requires that you have a fire department. You don't have to have your own, but this fire department has to have a response time to the midpoint of the the farthest runway. They have to be able to be there spraying foam within 3 minutes. So pretty much you have to have a fire department on the airport. You have to have emergency medical. You have to operate the lighting system. You have to maintain the airport in certain ways. So we get inspected once a year by a Federal Aviation Administration inspector. And it used to be a lot of paperwork. They would go through and look at all the paper, but nowadays it's all digital paperwork, so they can look at it at their office before they come down to Peoria. And then pretty much when they come to Peoria, they drive the field and look to see if we meet all the standards for the airfield. Who here hit a pothole today in their car? Yeah, so we can't have a pothole on a runway because that would damage the aircraft. So things that you see on a road that are acceptable to have on a road and your car can hit and survive, we can't have that stuff on a runway. So we have to close the runway and then fix it before it opens up again. I'm stuck in it.
Is it?
Yep. So the thing to remember about the airport authority is we don't sell any tickets, we don't handle any bags, we don't do any of that stuff. We don't get to decide where the airlines fly. And this graphic is here to show that if I got to pick where the flights went, we would go to Rhinelander, Wisconsin, because that's where I like to go for vacation. But that airplane would have 4 people on it twice a year. Probably wouldn't make any money. We might get a few others, but it is our job to meet with the airlines and try to come up with ideas that we think will make them money. And so we go and meet with them. Like, they know how many people, they know better than us how many people are buying tickets in Peoria. They know where those people are going, but they don't know where Peoria is. It's a dot on a map, and it's a digital map, and it's in their heads, and they don't, so it's up to us to tell them what's going on in Peoria. And, still even today, when we meet with the airlines, the only thing they know about Peoria is that Caterpillar left town, right? So what they don't know is that there's still 13,000 Caterpillar employees here, and there's still a lot of travel that happens here, and the people are still visiting. And so it's up to us to get that information to them. So speaking about passenger counts, this is fairly hot off the press information. This is a chart that I give to my board every month, and I call it the How Goes It chart. So it's the bars, going across is the month, and then the peach-colored bars are the record for each month, and then the thicker blue line with the symbol is the 5-year moving average. The thinner blue line is the record year, which in 2019, the record year was 2018. And then the green line is the current year. So this was 2019. This was our record year. So in the spaces where you see the green line exceeding the peach bar, that was a monthly record. So here's 2020, started off great. We set a record in January, we set another record in February. And February, we're starting to hear things about, people in China getting sick, and we're not really sure what's going to happen. And when I first made this graph, I set the bottom of it as 30,000 to show more variation between the months, right? And I was thinking about that, and I thought, if I ever have to drop this below 30,000, I probably won't have to worry about it because I'll be looking for a new job. So here, we had 2 normal weeks in March, and then the pandemic hit. So we had 2 weeks with almost no traffic. So we're about half of what we should be in March. And then April of 2020, that's where things went. So I had to alter my graph and go to 0. So that's what we had. And that number was actually wrong, but I can't change it because it's a picture. But then after, we still had a bunch of flights, but almost nobody flying. The Department of Transportation made the airlines keep flying because you had to fly medical personnel around and things like that. So that shows the rest of 2020. We kind of recovered back to about half during 2020. And then skipping ahead to 2024, we've pretty well recovered. If you look at the last green one there, that's our second best June that we've ever had. And that includes about 500 Army soldiers that were deploying down to Texas before they went overseas. And we couldn't get an airline to work that flight, so Airport Authority employees came in, and it was 4 Airbus 319s or 320s, and then 1 737, and they were all charters. 4 of them were Allegiant. 1 was an airline called Sierra Pacific that I've never heard of before, and that captain made a reputation for himself that he's probably not going to want to come back to Peoria, and we don't want him back. So he was a jerk. Yeah, they just do charters. It's a Sierra Pacific. Do you guys know this, the difference between an airline captain and a jet engine? The jet engine stops whining when it gets to the gate. Anyway, so we recovered back to normal. So the 5-year moving average is 2019 through 2023. So that's the number. And then we also compare ourselves to pre-COVID and current. So you can see the red line is 2020. 0 is the average of the last 5 normal years. And so we're just now, 2023 was 638. We're almost normal there. But normal is comparing ourselves to our best years ever, right? And then you can see the June one right over here. We finally exceeded that average. Well, for the second time this year, we've exceeded that average twice this year. So we're doing pretty well. So that's the answer. If somebody asked me why the parking lot's so full, it's because a lot of people are traveling. I'm going to skip through this real quick, but that was our route map in 2006, kind of our peak in terms of traditional cities, and we lost Detroit in 2018 because people weren't flying it enough. And that's what will happen. If you don't use a route, it goes away. That was our map in 2019. And then we lost, after 2020, the pandemic, we lost Delta. So we lost Atlanta and Minneapolis. And then this was our map in 2021. We had several new ads, actually. Allegiant started a Nashville flight in May of 2020. We actually called them up and said, we were planning a big kickoff for you. You're not actually going to start that, are you? And they were like, no, we're going to give it a try. The first Nashville flight went out with it was a 150-seat aircraft. It had 30 people on it. So they didn't make any money at that, but they've really stuck with us and have really kind of helped develop our market. But the green lines on there, those are the new cities. I get asked, how's the Nashville flight doing? It's still not doing well. It's about 50-60% load factor. You want 80% for it to be healthy. That's how many seats are occupied. But the airplane goes Nashville, Peoria, Peoria, Denver, Denver, Peoria, Peoria back to Nashville. And Denver is doing so well that it's keeping the Nashville flight alive. So what are our challenges? Leakage. That's people who live in our area, buy a ticket, and get on an airplane somewhere else. I'm going to skip through this really quickly, but that's our service area, and we retain about 58% of the tickets that are sold in our area, and the rest of the people are going somewhere else. After AirTran folded, well, they didn't fold, but Southwest bought them and shut them down. Our percentage of leakage to Bloomington went way down, but our percentage of leakage to Chicago went up. So we've got about 800 to 1,000 people a day that depart from Peoria. We still have 200 people a day that are driving to Chicago. So if we can capture those folks, that's where our growth is going to come from. This is what leakage costs you. So every time, and these are business numbers, right? So if you're on a business trip and you buy a ticket, you drive up to Chicago, you get on a plane, and then you fly back to Chicago and drive back here, it costs you $389 before you bought your ticket. So it's less if you're, these are IRS and AAA numbers. And so if you go, like if you're going to go on a personal trip, it's less, but it still costs you more. The difference is less is what I meant, but it still costs you more to fly out of another airport. The real damage that you're doing when you do that is that the airline has the zip code on your credit card account. So when you buy a ticket and you live in Peoria and you drive to Chicago to get on the plane, they know it. And you just told them that they don't need to send that airplane to Peoria. So that's the real damage. It hurts our ability to gain new service and go to places that you want to go. I've spoken here before. You guys have all heard me say this before. Now that you know this information, I know some of you are still going to do it. I just feel really guilty. And I've said that before too. So what are we looking for in the future in terms of passenger service? We applied for a grant through the Small Community Air Service Development Program. And that's a US DOT program to help communities that have been hurt by airline deregulation to kind of recapture air service. And we were able to show that because of Delta leaving our market, that we're an underserved market. We worked with American and United to get letters of support for service to Phoenix and to Denver. We got letters of support from both airlines, and so we actually got a grant for $500,000 that we're going to match with $500,000. Plus, we're getting some in-kind services in terms of advertising commitments and things like that. So the total, plus fee abatements, so the total value of the project is about $1.2 million. And it looks to me like in our conversations that we've been having with the airlines since the grant award, it looks like the one that is more likely to happen is the Denver flight. So that would be, 7 round trips a day on regional jet to Denver. Right now, our Denver service is twice a week on Allegiant. This would be every day. We really think they're different markets. We don't think that this business type service is going to hurt the Allegiant market at all, but we'll see. That was something that after we got the grant, you kind of, as an airport manager, you kind of have to apply for this money because otherwise the board will ask you why you didn't. And then when we got the grant, it's kind of like the dog that caught the car. You kind of go, what do you do now? So the first thing we did was meet with Allegiant to explain what was going on and how we think that this is a different market, and we're really not trying to, take their slice of the pie, but we are, because of the business traveler doesn't use Allegiant a whole lot. So anyway, that's going on. And then everybody wants to know about the control tower. Our control tower is probably our biggest challenge. The old terminal is the only thing left in that building. They lease 4,700 square feet, and we did some partial demolition of the tower, the old terminal. So it's about 47,000 square feet of building that's there so the FAA can rent 4,700 square feet. It was cut off from all funding sources, and our congressional delegation got language inserted into the bipartisan infrastructure law so that we would be eligible to compete for grants. When we first put this together, we did a site selection study back in like 2012. We did the design starting in about 2013 and finishing up in 2016. The FAA put the brakes on it. Well, frankly, it's because Ray LaHood retired too early. And I talked to him about that one time, and he apologized. But when we started working on this, we were thinking $27 million with professional services and inspection and testing and the whole deal, right? That number has gone up to $59.8 million. We've received a grant for a little under $16 million, and they've announced a grant for just a little over $14 million. So we should have $30 million, which we thought was going to be enough to cover it. But between inflation and, frankly, the FAA added $10 million of cost in terms of reimbursable agreements, which is like us paying for their cost on this project. And in terms of equipment and furniture and things like that we were hoping they would provide, but they're not. And about $1 million to redesign the building, because over 5 years from the design completion till construction, their standards changed so much. If you got a couple hours, I can tell you the rest of that story. But anyway, we're marching forward. We're actually doing mine mitigation right now. Well, first, that's the airport. That's the terminal area, and that's the terminal building right there. This is Byerly. That orange is a future parking deck, which may or may not happen, depends on how we grow. But this complex right here, that's the tower. And it's a tower and a base building. When I mentioned that the FAA announced a grant for $14 million, but we haven't received that money yet. It was because we didn't have bids in hand. So we took bids, got them in March, and the total cost for the project just blew our funding out of the water. So we had to redo the bids, and we rejected all the bids, and then we went and repackaged the project. So we're building the base building first, and kind of front-loading all the FAA costs. And so we're going to build this part first. And then phase 2 will be the actual tower shaft. And we're competing for additional funding to get that. If you drive through the airport right now, you'll see, cones and barrels and things like that. And what that basically is mine mitigation. So this is a coal mine map. Up here is Farmington Road. And down here, it's kind of hard to see, but there's a little green thing that says site. So that is the tower site. So if you basically drive from Farmington Road all the way down to on Maxwell Road, which you can't do right now because it's closed, but all the way down to the airport, that's all coal mined out. So this is a map of the areas that have been undermined. And up around this area, it's about 80 feet deep. Down here, it's somewhere between 175 and 200 feet deep. And what we're doing is drilling holes in the ground and injecting grout down underground to reinforce the mined out voids. So each one of these little symbols is a hole. These are kind of the perimeter, so they're putting a little thicker grout in there so that they form a barrier, and then the other holes are just going to be filled with grout. That is basically to reinforce the ground underneath where the tower is going to be. Back in the 60s, the same thing was done underneath the old terminal because they were concerned about mine subsidence and failures. If you have a mine failure, you have a shaft of overburden that collapses, but then it also draws in from the surrounding area, and it can be as shallow as a 3 or 4 degree angle. And And so that's why we're drilling so many holes so far around it. The actual tower is going to be right about there. So that's about a $3.5 million project to reinforce that area. If you look at the mind map, the second best, we picked the shortest site, the tower site that would give you the shortest tower. We did that because it's cheaper, right? So if you go to the other site that was a little bit taller, you're not going to save money on mine mitigation because the mine extends over there. So we elected to keep the site and go ahead and work on the mine mitigation. I know more about mining than I ever wanted to. If you live south of Route 150, especially on the west side of Peoria, I hope you have mine subsidence insurance. I live just north of 150, so I don't think I have it, but I'm hoping I don't need it. And I think that's about it. So in Scouts, we call the adults the wise old owls, and we do a thing called Wood Badge, and I was in the Owl Patrol. So does anybody have any questions for the wise old owl? Sure.
It's okay, good. The cake was good, the frosting was outstanding. Yeah.
Cream cheese frosting.
Yeah.
Welcome back, by the way.
Thank you.
When I was on the board, 2019 was a major year as far as passenger count is concerned. Do you anticipate passing that this year?
I don't think we'll pass 2019. We'll come close. We'll probably have our second best year. So I'm hoping we pass 2018, which was the previous record. The first part of the year wasn't as busy as it has been. Typically our peak months are March or April, depending on when spring break happens, and then summertime for the summer vacation travel. So keeping our fingers crossed, and we'll see how it goes. And if we are able to get the Denver or Phoenix flights launched, that'll help. Yes, sir.
Question, I have family returning from Europe. They should have been here yesterday, and they were leaving the Munich, Germany airport. That airport was shut down, and their flight was diverted to London, and they should be back here today. But the reason the airport was shut down is that there were 6 protesters. Let me change that. There were 6 idiots that glued themselves to the runway protesting air pollution. Do you have procedures in place that would discourage idiots from gluing themselves to the runway?
Probably, well, we have a fence around the entire airport. I'm sure that Munich does also, and they probably scaled the fence. We go up, first of all, we have a 24-hour control tower, so they're out looking at the airfield all the time, and our operations people go out there a bunch of times. So we would probably, like, our security posture is not to be able to repel an assault. It's to monitor and react to what happens. So if somebody wanted to hop the fence and go glue themselves to the runway, it could probably happen. So far, we haven't had anybody try to protest like that. And you can bet your bottom dollar they would get arrested. I don't know how much of a deterrent that is for those folks because I think they plan on getting arrested. But I've heard about those, and it's pretty much a climate protest, and they think that people who fly around in airplanes are evil, and we should go back to, I guess, covered wagons. Never mind that the most fuel-efficient way to move somebody a long distance, like cross-country, is to put them in an airplane and fly them there. You're going to burn a lot less fuel by putting people in an airliner and flying them across the United States than you would if they all jumped in their car and drove. So there's not a whole lot of logic behind it, plus the safety factor.
So I have a question. Thank you for being with us today. My wife and daughter and granddaughter were flying back from London. I don't remember all the issues, but they missed their flight, and then somebody sent them to, I'm gonna make this up, someplace in Kentucky or something to come back here. So they lost another day. What's your advice when your plane is canceled or you miss a flight? What would you tell your family members? Thanks.
Well, it happened to me a couple of years ago. I was in Las Vegas. I'd actually been there for a conference, and then Allegiant had a raffle, and I won football tickets. So I went and saw that Chargers-Raiders game a couple of years ago, where the winner of that went to the playoffs. And I still had to buy the airline ticket and the hotel room and everything. So this is 21, I think. And they couldn't get a flight attendant for my flight home, so my flight got canceled. And that's a twice-a-week flight, so I was there. I flew from Peoria to there on Friday, was coming home on Monday. The next airplane didn't go till Friday, so I happened to have the station manager's phone number in my cell phone, so I called him. He's looking around for any other way to get me home. And all the airplanes that were going to come within a day's drive of Peoria had already flown or were not for several days. So I got on the computer and booked 2 tickets on American and flew out the next day. The thing that I would advise people to do is be patient. Don't get angry. A lot of people think that if you yell at that person on the other side of the counter, it's going to make your day go better. Might make you feel a little better, but they're not going to help you anymore. So be patient, be kind, see what the airline will do for you, but then don't be afraid to jump airlines. And I think there's some new US DOT rules that if they're going to reaccommodate you and you don't like the way they're going to reaccommodate you, you can decline that and they have to pay you a refund. So, you know, these are airplanes and they fly through the weather and they can handle a lot of weather, but they can't handle all weather. They break sometimes, but it's amazing that they can get you, you know, where you're trying to go most of the time. And I don't mean like 50% of the time, I mean like 90% of the time. So be flexible, see what the airline will do for you, but also do your own research and see what you can arrange and try to get a different arrangement.
Is there a good website to go to?
I like to go to each airline's website. So if you know you're flying to Peoria, you know, you're going to look at United and American's website. I never use the travel aggregators like Expedia, Travelocity. I never use those because if you have a problem at an airport and you go to the counter and say, you just canceled my flight, what are you going to do for me? They'll say, well, you're going to have to go call Travelocity or you're going to have to call Expedia. Whereas if you made your reservation through the airline, then they're going to deal with you right there. So, and you're not going to get a better price through Travelocity or Expedia than you do from the airline's website. Thank you all for having me, and I'll stick around in case anybody has a question or a personal experience.